we have a winner in Tata Steel Chess Masters, and I'm going to tell you who it is at the end of the video. Before that, I'm going to show you the games that led to that person being the winner, because guys, this was a spectacular finish to the tournament. Now, prior to this game, the three people that were really looking into being the winners were one, NODIRBEK, as he's been leading the whole tournament, and prior to this round, he was the person that has the most points. Then ANISH, who was half a point behind NODIRBEK, and then Magnus Carlsen, who was half a point behind ANISH. So depending on the results of these people, any of them could win the tournament. Now we're going to start with Magnus Carlsen, and we're going to start with his game. The game went knight f3. He was playing with the black pieces against Arjun Erigaisi, 19-year-old from India. Knight f6, g3, b6, bishop g2, bishop b7. Now Magnus said after drawing yesterday against Praggnanandhaa that he was very frustrated and that he didn't know if he was going to find the motivation to today's game. So castles g6, he fianchettoed on both sides, and this became a sort of, this actually ended up becoming a sort of King's Indian, it became a King's Indian attack basically in the ready. Now knight a6, knight c3, knight c5, and knight d4. So we're going pretty quick in the opening. But this is just a slightly better position for white. There's nothing crazy going on. Basically, Magnus is giving up his center for getting a little bit of more piece activity and developing his pieces very, very quickly. So e5, kicking away the knight, and now knight c2, and now Magnus is regaining a little bit of the center. And he's going to the center, but he also wants to get some space on the queen side as he wants to stop Arjun from playing b4. So b3, d6, e4, and now bishop c8. He decided to go back with the bishop. Now this move, when it was played, I thought it was a little bit surprising, but his idea is to go bishop d7 and then try to push a4. So the bishop is not doing anything on b7, it's blocked by several pawns, so that is why he wants to do this. So knight a3, simply developing the knight, and now knight e8. The plan became after knight b5, bishop d7, that now if white would go a3, he could go a4, as if b4, there would be knight b3. See the pawn here defending the knight? But because rook b1 was played, if now Magnus would go a4, that would be b4, and the knight would just get kicked away and the knight couldn't go anywhere. So instead, Magnus went for another really good plan, f5. It's actually really nice how Magnus is both playing on the queen side and on the king side at the same time. f3, and now he pushed f4. He went even further. a3, g5, b4, kicking away the knight. The knight went back to b7, and now g4. Arjun was trying to lock in the position. We can see that now it's pretty locked in. Magnus went h5, h3, so that if captures, there's captures, and there's no entrance. And so Magnus now started trying to find an entrance in the position. But Magnus is actually slightly better over here. We can see here rook f7 was played, king f2, and here, Arjun went on a king walk. We can see here that Magnus is really trying to find some sort of opening, but Arjun just decided to bring the king to the other side of the board because he didn't want the king to be here where it could be attacked by Magnus' pieces. So queen c8, rook b2, and knight d8. Now before we continue, I've actually forgotten to tell you that I am right now at Tata Steel. Like, you guys can see the background, like this is where the games have been played. I've got my little broadcasting room from the tournament hall. So what you're seeing right now is actually where this tournament took place. So just wanted to let you know of that. Queen d3 and knight f7. So now Magnus has decided to reroute his pieces and basically in positions like this, to enter, a lot of times you have to sacrifice a piece. And that can be really scary because the moment you sacrifice a piece, you're opening up the position, you're a piece down. But Magnus was right now just constantly trying to find breakthroughs, different breakthroughs. Bishop e7, king c2, the king walk continues. And now he decided to take on b4. And in this position, he also took on g4. So he opened up both files, and now both of these rooks are right now in an open file. Rook a1, rook b1 exchanging, and now rook h2 check, just asking where's the king going to go. Now in this position, the king could have gone up to b3. This could have been one idea, but instead rook g2 was played, just trying to exchange the rooks. And after the exchanges, there was a lot of exchanges of rooks. Magnus did a brilliant move. And it takes actually the engine. You have to go to a very high depth, like depth 40, something like that, to be able to see this move. He went knight takes g4. He sacrificed his knight. Crazy. And this chess.com gives it a brilliant move after some analysis. He sacrificed his knight for 2 pawns, basically saying that he's going to get a lot of play with these 2 pawns. These 2 pawns are now pass pawns, but his minor pieces are also going to be really good. And white's king is actually pretty weak over here. I mean, if he's able to open up somehow here, I mean, this king is very weak. And once again, he has these 2 pawns, which is the biggest advantage. So this actually now becomes a pretty, I wouldn't say equal, but I mean, Magnus has a lot of compensation, and he wanted to stir up the game, I think, because he really needed to win if he wanted to have a chance of winning the tournament. So bishop f3 was played, and in this position he went bishop h3 with the idea that he wanted to start pushing his pawns, and now after knight e2, he wanted to go bishop f1, pinning this knight. So the queen went back to d1, and now he went bishop g2, and his plan is very simple. Boom, boom, boom. He wants to promote to a queen. So bishop g6, knight g5 is bringing several pieces to the attack, and now knight c3. And in this position, after the knight went to c3, a very clear idea for Magnus is to get now his queen to the a file. But he also has another idea, which is, well, first he's pinning the knight, king g7. He also has the idea that maybe he wants to start bringing the queen here. So he either wants to bring the queen on the a file or on the h file, and he can kind of choose where he wants to go. So bishop f5 was played, and he decided to go queen h8 first. And now, actually, Aryan made a blunder. He thought that these pawns were too strong, and he didn't really want to deal with them. But in this position, he already has quite a bad position, so it's not really maybe a blunder, but knight takes f4. This just makes the game a little bit easier, I think, for Magnus. So he decided to give back the knight. Now, after knight takes f4, the idea is that he's getting 2 pawns. It's now equal material between Magnus and Aryan, but Magnus has right now this move queen h4. So this is a really nice idea, just trying to bring in the queen and defending and helping out with trying to promote this pawn. Instead, bishop f6 was played, threatening the knight. This is also a really good move. And now after queen c1 was played, there is once again queen h4. This knight is under attack. Instead, he decided to defend the knight by moving it. Knight b5, and now queen a8, looking towards a1. Beautiful, beautiful. And now there is a terrible position for Aryan. Actually, maybe if Aryan would have played, in a perfect way, he could have tried to save the game. But practically, it's really difficult to save a position like this against Magnus because it's just so much easier. The plans for Magnus are so much easier than the plans for Aryan. Magnus just wants to push the pawn. Magnus just wants to checkmate the king, whereas Aryan needs to try to defend, which is a lot harder. So he went e5, trying to block the diagonal for the bishop. D takes e5, and now bishop d2. Knight d6 was played, putting a little bit of pressure on this pawn, but also trying to exchange the knights. And this was really nice. Bishop h6, king f7. Now knight takes d6, takes, bishop g5. Aryan wants to desperately exchange pieces. But now queen h8. Now the queen is finding another place to go. And I just find it beautiful how Magnus is playing both on the queen and the king side constantly throughout the game. So in this position, bishop went back to e3. Now queen h2 would have been a good move. Instead, e4 was played, just opening up for this bishop and the queen. Bishop takes b6. Magnus is sacrificing the pawn. But now queen h2. And the attack is just so strong. The bishop went back to g1. Queen e2. I mean, the pawn pushes. And after queen d3, Aryan, Eric IC resigned because there's nothing he can do. The king cannot go anywhere here. The king could go to a2. But then there's going to be bishop d1. And this is going to be a checkmate. This is actually now a forced checkmate in 7. And if he goes something like queen c2, for instance, there is queen a3, and the queen is going to be checkmated on a1. If queen a2 to defend it, there is queen b4 check. And after king c2, queen c3 check. And after king b1, queen e1 checkmate. This is absolutely beautiful. Well, okay, there's king c2, and now there is, queen d1 checkmate. Okay, but this is absolutely beautiful, I think. So, yeah, the game ended there. The game ended there after queen d3 check, and Magnus Carlsen won. Magnus winning took him to 8 points, and this was the same amount of points as NODIRBEK was in, the guy that was leading the tournament. So as long as NODIRBEK lost the game and ANISH drew or lost the game, Magnus would come shared first. We're gonna go ahead and check, guys, if that is what happened. So we're gonna check now the NODIRBEK game. NODIRBEK, he, like I said, he was leading the whole tournament the whole time. He was playing a fantastic tournament, and he was today playing with the white pieces against Jordan Van Forest, the lowest rated player in the whole tournament. Now, NODIRBEK was probably feeling like, he's playing with the white pieces. There's no way he's going to lose. He'll get a draw or he'll get a win. It's not going to be a hard game. He's played against a lot of harder opponents prior, if you look at the ratings. So he went e4, c5, knight f3, e6, d4, and this became over here, this became a Taimanov. Now bishop e3, a6, stopping knight b5. This is all theory. Queen f3, and now h5. In Jordan, we can see that yesterday Jordan played against Anish. It became a draw, but he played a really exciting game with h4, h5, and today Jordan was showing the same sort of aggressiveness that he's going to go h5, and he's playing for a win. And you could tell that, he's playing for a win. And you could tell it already at move 7. So long castles was played, and actually NODIRBEK, he was thinking quite a bit, and Jordan was playing at tempo. He was playing immediately. He had prepared all of this. b5, trying to get a little bit of attack on now white's king, who's just castled. Queen g3, this became an exchange of queens, and one might think here, oh, the queens are exchanged, there's no more attack. That is not true. You can still attack when the queens are off the board. So bishop c5, putting a little bit of pressure on the knight. g4, you can see here that this rook, well, the pawn is pinned because the rook is undefended, so now black cannot capture the pawn because then the rook would be hanging. So in this position, Jordan just decided that he did not care. He won bishop b7, and now actually you could take this pawn. This is very much a really good move for NODIRBEK, maybe the move that he should have gone for. Rook takes h5, but instead he went for f3, just defending everything. g6 was played. Now the pawn is defended. Knight f5, which looks like an absolutely insane move, but the idea is just simply that if you capture here, white will be capturing the bishop, and then this will be a really nice position for white because all the dark squares will be taken. So takes and takes, black did not want to allow that, and then king e7. The king is staying in the center. And now, NODIRBEK has a slightly better position. At any point, he can just capture on h5 and maybe go g4 and g5, and this pawn is going to become very, very weak. So, he could still do that. But in this position, he went bishop e2. He developed his bishop. d6 was played, and now he played a very interesting move, g5. Now, what is the idea of g5? Well, he's trying to limit this knight. In this position, the king cannot really go anywhere because then NODIRBEK will be capturing the pawn. But if the king doesn't go anywhere, then the knight cannot get out. So he's just limiting the movement of this knight. But what is the issue of this move? Well, the issue of this move is that this pawn right here could become a weakness, especially after the plan that Jordan got here, f6, and now f4. And now after takes and takes, this pawn is not defended by any pawn, it's completely alone, and now this pawn can become a weakness. So knight e5 was played, centralizing the knight. Rook d4, which is a really strong move, because the threat otherwise was to go b4, kick away the knight, and then the pawn is hanging. So b4, and now rook d8, and now rook hd1 was played, just simply doubling up the rooks, but actually here NODIRBEK was missing the idea of going a4, and he kept on missing this move, a4, and this is a really strong move, and this is a really important move actually, because in this position, if a4, if Jordan would capture the pawn after rook takes, we can see that the bishop and the rook would be pointing towards this a6 pawn, and actually this pawn would become so weak. But if Jordan doesn't capture, what is he going to do? He cannot just let NODIRBEK get a free pawn here, and he cannot push the pawn because then this is hanging. So maybe he has to go something like knight c6 and then push, but then this square for the knight will become absolutely fantastic. So this is not really something he wants to do. So a4 would give Jordan a lot of trouble. But rook hd1 was played looking towards capturing on d6, and now h4. Now, the idea of h4 is one, to go h3 and just activate this rook, which has been by itself the whole game. If the rook cannot get activated this way, then the rook might as well get activated this way. But there's another idea, which is also sometimes to be able to go rook h5 perhaps and threaten this pawn. So knight g4, knight c6 was played, threatening the rook. Now the rook went back. Now rook h5. the knight is actually blocking for the bishop, defending on h5. And I don't know if NODIRBEK missed this, but this just actually started giving Jordan a little bit of an edge, because all of a sudden I think NODIRBEK realized, wait, how am I defending this pawn? This pawn is actually not so easy to defend. So he went e5, which is a good move, and now d5 was played. After d5, knight e4. And this looks absolutely insane. It looks like NODIRBEK is just sacrificing a piece. But the idea is, and this is really beautiful, the idea is that if now Van Forest would capture, there's rook takes, and after knight takes, there's this insane move, knight f6, with the idea of going rook d7 check and, you know, pretty much winning this knight, because the king will not be able to go here. So this actually really good, and this would give him a really beautiful position. If something like this, there's just rook d7 check, and after king f8, there is this. But, you know, I mean, it's not only that. I mean, the bishop would also pretty much be falling. So this would be a really, really, really good position now for NODIRBEK. So over here, instead of capturing, bishop c8 was played just to get the bishop out of this situation. And now knight g f6. So now NODIRBEK got a really nice knight on f6. But the knight, the question is the knight prettier than what it actually, you know, is useful? And it kind of was the case. The knight wasn't so useful, so another knight went up to f6. The issue is that whenever the knight comes back to g4, then this rook will be able to go to h5 and will be able to attack this pawn. So rook d8, and now rook e1, h3. Now Jordan is trying to exchange. And actually in this position, I mean, the game is not so clear anymore. Jordan has a slight edge because his pieces are really good, and this knight, although it looks really pretty, is actually not doing much on f6. So in this position, actually bishop d3 was an important move looking towards g6, but in this position bishop g4 was played instead, rook h4, threatening sort of the bishop a little bit, and then b3. And after b3, there's the issue that actually this pawn over here can be targeted really easily after a5, a4, rook h8. He's doubling up the rooks, rook h2, and now there were just some exchanges, a5 pushing the queenside pawns, a3, and now bishop a6. And I mean, Jordan is just playing fantastic chess. Rook e1, and now b4, just really controlling. Look at this bishop, how good it's becoming. But now Jordan is just really controlling the position. And here, a4 was played, kind of blocking the whole queenside. And now there were several things he could do. Now, I mean, Jordan is quite a lot better, and I'm sure that Magnus are really happy about this, because obviously Magnus wanted NODIRBEK to lose, as then they would get the same points, and they might share first prize, as long as Giri doesn't, you know, win. So knight d8, and now there's some crazy ideas with knight d8, of going knight f7, and of, you know, trying to capture on g5, and this pawn, once again, is the biggest weakness in the position. Now, in this position, there was also the idea of going rook h2, and then going for some crazy stuff like knight d4, and then even bishop d3. So this is another idea of targeting the c2 pawn, but we're going to keep it kind of short, and I'm just going to show you what he did. So knight d8, and here bishop e2, and this was actually also a mistake by NODIRBEK. He was quite low on time here. He decided to threaten to exchange the bishops, but this is actually not a good idea. And now after knight f7, we can see that this pawn is just so targeted, and it's so hard to defend it. You cannot defend it. So in this position, c3 was played, and after c3, bishop takes, king takes c3. There's so many ideas, but knight takes g5 was played, b4, and now there's rook h3 check, the king moves, and boom, you take the pawn on b4. This a pawn, it wants to go running, but you can always stop the a pawn by going rook a3 and taking it. So rook c2 was played, trying to get the rook up on the c file, and now this is terrible. I mean, this is a completely lost position for NODIRBEK, because he is right now 2 pawns down, but this pawn is really weak, and this pawn is really weak. Knight f3 was played to capture the e5 pawn, and then knight g4, and in this position rook g3 would have been a great move, just threatening the knight and then taking this, but instead knight d4 was played, targeting the rook, rook c8, rook b3 check, and after this he simply captured the a4 pawn and said, I am now 3 pawns up, NODIRBEK, what are you going to do? Knight f6, and in this position, after b3, we saw resignation. The game ended here. The game ended here, and Jordan Van Four is the lowest rated player in the tournament, beat NODIRBEK. NODIRBEK had not lost any single game prior to this one, and if NODIRBEK would have won this game, he would have won the tournament. but Jordan Van Foreest, the Dutch player, stopped him. So that was actually insane. I don't think NODIRBEK was expecting at all to lose this game, and he was extremely sad at the end of the game, which is very, very normal. But there was still a fantastic performance by NODIRBEK. And well, I mean, at this point, NODIRBEK, like, he was like, okay, I have the same points as Magnus, but you know, he wanted to be a solo winner. But there was another situation, which was what was going on with ANISH Giri. ANISH Giri was playing against Richard Rapport with the white pieces. And you know that all games with Richard Rapport become crazy, and this was no exception to it. So e4, c5, this became a Sicilian, an open Sicilian. And now, well, you guys can see this became a classical Richard Rouser variation, but now this became a Richard Rouser Dragon variation. When the Dragon variation is characterized by going g6 and fianchettoing your bishop. So bishop takes f6. In this position, you may say that ANISH just has a fantastic, fantastic pawn structure in comparison to the opponent. Which it does. I mean, this pawn is really weak. These pawns are kind of weak, but I mean, we know that Richard likes playing strange, weird stuff sometimes, and this is no exception to it. So bishop d7, stopping the pin, and now the bishop went back to c4. Development, and now takes, bishop takes, castles, castles, and queen d3. And this is the position that we have out of the opening. Now, what are some characteristics of this position? Well, black wants to go f5 to open up for this bishop, but black cannot go f5 yet. I mean, if black is able to go f5 and take this, both this bishop and this one are both going to be super strong in the board. And I mean, black just needs to make sure that they don't lose this d6 pawn. That's everything Rapport needs to think about. So rook c8, knight d5, there is this fantastic square for the knight. And now rook e8, c3, bishop d7, bishop b5, and now the bishop just went back. And now the bishop went back to c4, so they're kind of repeating moves. And Rapport, I mean, he's happy with the draw, so he decided to go back to d7. But here, we did not see ANISH. He was not happy with the draw. He wanted to win. He knew that if he won, he had chances of winning the tournament, so he did not go back to b5. He went rook e1 instead, just getting the rooks in the game. Now, finally, f5 was possible for Rapport, and bishop b3 was played. Takes, takes, and bishop f4. Now, guys, this is not, you know, a pin where you're winning something. There is rook e8 check prior to this. And after it takes, there is queen d2. The queen is going back to d2. Now, bishop e6, just targeting, you know, this knight a little bit. And now rook d1 defending. Queen d7 and h3, getting a little bit of air for the king. So far, the game looks pretty natural. I mean, white feels a little bit better because this d6 pawn is hanging. b5 was played here, and then queen f4 and rook c5. And now in this position, after knight e3, bishop e5 and queen e4, king g7, ANISH said, I'm going to show you Rapport how I can win. He went f4. He went f4, just threatening the bishop. The bishop has to go back to f6 pretty much. And now he went g4, and he just started pushing all his pawns on the king's side, which I just find absolutely amazing. Now, there's a lot of tactics in this position, actually. Rapport went h6, and there's a lot of different ideas here. In this position, the best move would have been to capture, the best move for ANISH would have been to capture this bishop on e6, because there's this really beautiful idea that if you capture back with the pawn, he can go h4, and now bishop takes h4 is not possible because there's queen check. I don't know where the king goes. There's queen takes rook, and look, he cannot capture back because the pawn is pinned, the queen is hanging. This is beautiful. So h4 here was the key idea, to try to go g5 and then try to bring up a knight to g4 and play against the really, really, really weak dark squares that black is going to have. But instead here, I mean, it almost felt like he mouse slipped, you know, on bishop d5 instead of capturing the bishop on e6. And that would have given him great winning chances to capture on e6. And now Rapport said, you know what, I'm not going to let you to capture my bishop. I'm going to take yours. Knight takes, and this is still a good position for ANISH. Rook c4, targeting the queen. The queen goes to f3, and now queen e6. f5 was played. ANISH is just threatening the queen. He wants to open up a little bit for the king as well. But it's not only that move that he's trying to go for. Actually, after f5, it's not just that he wants to target the queen. It's actually that he's opening up this square for the knight. Look at this. The plan is to bring up the knight to h5 and go for a fork with the king and the bishop. Queen e5, knight h5 check. And now the king moved to g6. And guys, this was a huge blunder. Rapport in this position had to go king g8 or king h7, but Rapport with no fear went king g6 and brought the king up. In this position, we weren't sure, what was going on, but Anish looked very happy, and there was a reason for it. Anish found a cheapo. He found the tactic. He called it himself a cheapo, by the way. Rook takes d6. Look at this fantastic move. What is the idea of this? The idea is that if the queen captures, there is a checkmate. There is a checkmate. But obviously, a lot of times when you see a super GM blunder like this, you think that there is some crazy line behind it. So Anish spent quite a lot of time thinking here, even though he saw rook takes d6 immediately. The king went up to g5, and now beautiful move by Anish, rook d5, threatening the queen. And if the queen goes something, there is rook takes f5 or queen takes f5. This is almost just a checkmate. So queen e1 check, king g2, bishop e7. And now there is queen takes f5. It's going to be a checkmate in, I think it was a checkmate in 12. But instead he went rook takes f5 and everyone was kind of shaking, like, it's what is going on. But here, king g6 should be played by Richard, but he went king h4. He kept on going up with the king. That was a crazy game to watch live. And in this position, after queen g3 check, Richard Rapport resigned. Why? Because after takes and takes, this is going to be a checkmate. Only move pretty much to stop it is to go either bishop g5, but then this pawn is hanging, or rook c5. But after this, there is the fantastic move b4. And now you have to take on f5, and there's a and here there is knight takes f5, and this is a fork where Anish would be winning the bishop and would be winning the endgame. So in this position, Rapport resigned. And guys, Anish Giri won the game, and he ended up having, because he started with 7.5 points, he won the game and got 8.5 points. Magnus Carlsen got 8, remember? NODIRBEK lost the game, so he got 8, and Anish Giri got half a point more than everyone else. Guys, Anish Giri is the winner of Tata Steel Chess Masters in a beautiful way somehow, Jordan Van Forest, his fellow countryman, Anish Giri is Dutch, Jordan Van Forest is Dutch, his fellow countryman helped defeat NODIRBEK so that Anish Giri could win the tournament, and Anish Giri wins for the very first time this tournament. This is huge. He's Dutch. This tournament has been happening in the Netherlands. So this was an absolute huge win for Anish. And today his whole family was here celebrating. Absolutely amazing. A big congrats to Anish Giri for winning Tata Steel Chess Masters this year. Let me know in the comments, if you were rooting for Anish, who you were rooting for. But there you have the winner. I'm going to be going now to the prize ceremony pretty soon, actually. So I need to run and get changed and run to the prize ceremony because it hasn't happened yet. But guys, I hope that you've enjoyed the recaps of this tournament. It's the first time I've been doing daily recaps of, other people's games. I hope you've enjoyed the commentary, the analysis, and everything in between. And I will see you all in my next video. Thank you guys so much for watching.